I was a last-minute replacement in an off-Broadway play. Something else was backstage with us. When I was getting started, an actor I knew gave me some really good advice. While deciding whether or not to take a certain role, consider 3 factors: the money, the show, and the people. If at least 2 of those things are good, accept the job. If they're paying you well and you love the play, you won't mind putting up with shitty people. If it's a great show with a cast full of friends, but you're not getting paid so well, that's still alright. It'll be artistically fulfilling. If it's a bad show but you love the cast and you're making money, you'll probably have the time of your life making fun of the playwright backstage and laughing all the way to the bank. What my friend failed to mention is that as an aspiring actor, you don't usually get to be that picky. When I got the call from my agent that a production of The Buckeye was urgently seeking a new chorus member, all I could see were dollar signs. My survival job had just fallen through. The family I nannied for was moving upstate, insisting that Manhattan had just gotten too dangerous for their toddler, and my savings were only going to cover my rent for another month. It was raining the day of my audition, and my train got delayed. I showed up panting. I had to run from the subway station, and my hair was a disaster. Luckily, in The Buckeye, the chorus is full of, Buckeye. Fervent followers of Dionysus, wild woman, drunk and running through the countryside. In the climax of the play, they crowd the protagonist in a frenzy, literally ripping him limb from limb. I'll never know if it was my frenetic energy from barely making it to the theater on time, or my actual acting, but I got the part. My costume fitting was the next day. They weren't kidding about urgently needing a replacement, which thrilled me, because I wasn't kidding about urgently needing the money. At the fitting, I discovered something my agent failed to mention about the production. This wasn't just any version of The Buckeye. It was a recreation, an attempt to perform the play in the traditional Greek style. In other words, everyone was wearing masks. I've never been fond of masks. We had to do a few assignments with them in my college acting courses. Covering your face can enhance the physicality of your body, something like that. But I never liked wearing them, or seeing other people wearing them. It wouldn't be fair to call it a full-on fear, but the stiffness, the lack of expression, gives me a weird feeling in my stomach. And wearing one, your field of vision limited, your mouth covered, making it hard to breathe, harder to project your voice. I don't like it. It's as simple as that. But I needed the money. My costume wasn't ugly, per se. Just strange. A long white dress, or maybe toga is a better word. The fabric about the thickness of a burlap sack. My mask, stark white, papier-mâché, covering my entire face except for my eyes. The mouth carved to imitate a grin. No shoes. My hair tucked into a wild black wig. We wore wigs, they explained to me, so the chorus would be identical, indistinguishable. We moved as one, spoke as one, and were meant to look like one. They even made sure to cast women of the same height. In our costumes, it was impossible to tell which of us was which. It didn't help that I was an outsider to the rest of the cast, joining the show weeks into rehearsals. Everyone seemed annoyed that they had to teach me the blocking, the inflection of the lines, so my voice didn't stick out from the other chorus girls, and where to go backstage during scenes with no chorus. A few people tried to be nice to me, but quickly gave up when they realized I knew nothing about Greek theater, or masked theater, or the avant-garde. My last show had been a regional production of Cats, for God's sake. I was totally out of my element. Things got especially sour when I tried to ask what had happened to the girl I was replacing. Nobody wanted to talk about it. People gasped when I brought it up. The clearest answer I got was a whispered, hesitant, "She fell." But the person wouldn't elaborate any further. The cast seemed superstitious, uncomfortable, like talking about her would cause them to suffer her fate. removal from the show. And it was clear that, aside from me, everyone else loved this show. The actor playing Dionysus, the couple of times he deigned to talk to me, just kept gushing about how honored he was to play this role, how electrifying it felt to put his history minor to use, to show people a piece of the world's theatrical beginnings. I thought the show was fine, kind of boring, kind of scary. I don't think I get the Bacchae. In brief, the story is about Dionysus, son of Zeus, disguised as a human. He and his followers, the chorus, show up in a town, but the leader of the town, Pentheus, is upset about it. He doesn't understand why all these women are acting crazy, and he arrests Dionysus, not believing him to be an actual god. As punishment, Dionysus possesses Pentheus's own mother with the same madness as his followers, and together, with their bare hands, they rip Pentheus apart. His mom walks back into town holding her son's head, thinking it to be, in her madness, the head of a lion. When she realizes what she's done, she is overwhelmed by grief, and futilely attempts to put Pentheus's mutilated corpse back together. Dionysus returns, basically saying, "Well, he said I wasn't a god, and that's blasphemous, so he got what was coming to him." Pentheus's mother is exiled. It's incredibly dark. In the reviews, critics called it daring, challenging, a bloody spectacle, a feminist masterpiece. I don't really get what part of a man who's a god possesses women's minds, driving them to murder screams feminism, but hey, I'm the girl who commuted to New Jersey every day for 4 months to do Cats. What do I know? Here's something I do know. The other chorus girls did not like me, and they took their jobs seriously. As we waited to enter for each scene, there was dead quiet in the wings. Usually, there's some light joking, maybe quickly running lines, maybe physical warm-ups, shaking out your nerves. I tried to do this once. Before our entrance at the top of the show, we all gathered in the stage right wing. All 12 of us, a perfect and identical dozen. It was a dress rehearsal, no audience. I did a few jumping jacks, trying to hype myself up. Another masked girl grabbed my bicep, hard. When I turned, she just shook her head no. Just a simple, silent no. We don't do that here. We stand silently in the wings, focusing on our craft, breathing, waiting for our entrance. I never tried it again. When you can't talk to your coworkers, acting becomes a lot less fun. The collaboration element is totally gone. And honestly, the acting element was gone for me, too. How am I supposed to find my character's sense of identity in a role, when my role is, don't let your voice stick out, don't take a wrong step, blend in perfectly with 11 women who dislike you? So before the shows, instead of chatting or doing jumping jacks, I wandered the theater. I've always loved theaters. The dramatic architecture, the ornate prosceniums, the stark contrast of Backstage. So dark, so dusty. The theater was no Broadway house, but it had a fly system, which we didn't use, because the Greeks wouldn't have been able to fly anything in. Just over 300 seats, including a mezzanine. Fancy! And lots of backstage space. I could say more about it, because I spent hours during the run of the show wandering, but it wouldn't be terribly interesting to anyone who's not me. Just know, it was a beautiful old theater. And I mean old. Built in the 1910s, just before the Great Depression. I used to love imagining how many generations of people had performed on that stage, imagining what they'd think of this show, or what they'd think of me. About a week into my wandering, on some 15-minute break, I was looking at the ladder that led up to the catwalk, a long, thin metal walkway stretching across the stage from above, usually used for hanging lights. I wondered how long it had been since it was used during a show. I wondered if it was even safe. What would the view be like from up there, seeing the entire stage from 30 feet in the air? I slowly looked up the ladder. I wouldn't actually climb it. That would be crazy, right? I'm not particularly good with heights. As my eyes lifted, I made eye contact. Or rather, mask contact. With someone. A fellow chorus girl, up on the catwalk. I stopped breathing for a second. What was she doing up there? I started to say something stupid like, "Why are you up there?" When just as quickly as the face appeared, it vanished. I saw her white-robed form retreat down the catwalk, heading for a different ladder, probably. It was weird. Why did she run? Embarrassed to be caught somewhere she shouldn't be? I allowed myself to entertain a little fantasy. Maybe she was just like me. Maybe she also hated the other chorus girls, and didn't get the Bakai. Maybe she was exploring the theater for fun on her break, enjoying the old architecture, like I did. I had no idea who she was under the mask, and she had no idea who I was. She probably thought I was one of the normal judgmental girls, and ran off before I could tell on her to the stage manager. I was filled with unfounded hope. Could I make a friend here? Was it possible? After 2.5 weeks of silence from the other girls, it was hard to imagine. How would I find her? How would I let her know it was me, that I had seen her on the catwalk, and we were the same? After that day, I got much more observant. When the director called for a break, instead of immediately retreating into the depths of the backstage, I watched my 11 doppelgangers carefully, tracking who went for water, who went back to the dressing rooms, who ran off toward the vending machines. It was hard to tell everyone apart, but people had to take their masks off to drink water eventually. I memorized faces and tried to keep track of them. I started to get a handle on everyone's patterns, narrowing down potential adventurers. It was impossible. 11 people is just too many to observe. But I'm an actor. Memorizing shit is literally my job. By week 4, just 2 days from opening, I had 3 potential girls. I tried to stick close to them during rehearsals, picking one to follow each day, but nobody ever wandered towards the catwalk. Maybe the girl, whoever she was, had been scared away from adventuring when I caught her. I started to lose hope. We were opening soon. I should focus on making my entrance, not making friends. But then I saw her again. This time, it was half an hour before the curtain went up for our invited dress rehearsal. The press was there. I was nervous. I knew I had my part down, but when you're doing a show, no matter how prepared you are, there's always the lingering fear that you'll freeze up, forget everything, and ruin everyone's hard work. It just means that you care. I was surprised that I cared so much. I still didn't even get the play. I couldn't let the other girls see me weak. I barely show my real feelings to people I care about, much less mean actresses who look down on me. To get away from it all, I wandered down to another unused part of the stage, the orchestra pit. We did have music in the show, but the Greeks didn't have orchestra pits, so it was closed off, being used as storage. I loved it down there. I loved looking through the storage bins, finding props from long-forgotten productions. Sometimes I would find something incredible, something I swore was from the day the theater opened, something old and valuable, and usually I could never find it again. Those bins were a treasure trove. Of all the weird little spaces I found backstage, the pit was my favorite. I felt like a real explorer down there, illuminating my path with my phone flashlight, getting spooked when a mouse ran over my foot. Of course the theater had mice. It was more than 100 years old. And besides, every building has mice in New York City. That day, I wasn't there to look around, just to sit, just to catch my breath. I tiptoed down the creaky steps and plopped myself on the ground, surrounded by bins. I inhaled and exhaled, smelling the mildewy scent of old props on every side of me. And that's when I heard a noise. Not a mouse noise. I was used to those. Something bigger. I turned my phone flashlight on immediately, calling, "Hello?" And the light landed on a mask, just like mine. Mine, which was currently off because I was doing my breathing exercises. I felt exposed. She could see my face, but I couldn't see hers. I stood up. "You scared me." She didn't respond. She looked at me for a second and started to retreat the other way, towards the stairs at the other side of the pit. "Wait," I called. "I won't tell anyone I saw you." She stopped for a second, but then she kept walking. I stood and followed. "Please stop. Can I at least know who you are? I don't fit in with most of the chorus girls." I reached for her long white toga. I swear I had it in my hand, but somehow she slipped away. I staggered a bit, almost tripped, confused that I hadn't made contact with her costume. And when I looked back up, I only saw a glimpse of her disappearing up the stairs. I tried to follow again, but I found that side of the pit's stairs reached a dead end. I didn't understand how she'd gotten out. And when I looked back down at my phone, it was time for places. Disappointed and defeated, I rushed away to the other stairs, making my way to the stage right wing to wait for my entrance. I counted heads immediately when I arrived. Maybe she hadn't made it back yet. But alas, 12. All accounted for. I nudged a girl next to me, subtly. "Who was the last one here besides me?" She just stared at me for a moment, which came off as very creepy through the blank, dead stare of her mask. How the fuck am I supposed to know? We all look exactly the same. I sighed. "Okay. Thanks." For nothing, I thought bitterly. The invited dress went well. The press liked it. As I've already said, I was distracted the entire time. After that day, I made it a habit to count all the girls when the stage manager called for places. If I was right about this girl, she, like me, would be one of the last, if not the last one there. She would be wandering, exploring, getting away from the bullies. I wish I hadn't done this. I wish I'd given up when she disappeared on a dead-end staircase. I wish I'd never seen her on the catwalk. Because when I started counting heads, I noticed something impossible. Sometimes, before we went on, I counted 13 identical masked faces. It was a chorus of 12. It was supposed to be 12. I'd recount again. 13. A chill went down my spine. We all looked the same. Same masks, same togas, same wigs. Who was the imposter? How could anyone be an imposter? It didn't make sense. How would they get into the theater? How would they get a costume? I started counting more often. Between scenes, in the dressing rooms, even on stage during dull moments. It fluctuated. Sometimes I'd count 12 for a whole day, an entire show, and sigh in relief, feeling like some curse was broken. But the next day, at least once, I'd count 13. And it seemed as if one masked pair of eyes was always trained on me. I don't know how she knew it was me. We looked the same. But she'd stare. It felt scary, but also ridiculous. I couldn't be sure it was the same person looking every time. I couldn't be sure it was unlucky number 13. But it felt like it was. I felt a lot of things. I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. The other girls already didn't like me. I couldn't have them thinking I was crazy. And admitting the presence of the 13th would mean admitting to my adventures into forbidden backstage areas. I couldn't lose this job. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I wasn't eating well or sleeping well. maybe this was all hallucination. And somehow, my biggest feeling was that if I told someone about the 13th, I'd never see her again. And I needed to see her again. The obsession had only gotten stronger. I knew, somehow, deep inside, that she was the one I had seen on the catwalk and in the orchestra pit. I no longer wanted to be her friend. I wanted to corner her, to ask who she was and why she was sneaking in as if she was one of us. I wanted to ask what she wanted from me. Because she must want something from me, right? Why else would she stare? Why would she appear only to me? The timing never lined up. The show had opened at this point, and I had a job to do, delighting the audience. I couldn't skip my entrance to catch number 13. The chorus formations would look ridiculous with a missing person, and as much as the other girls hated me, I owed it to them as my co-stars to make them look good. Logically, I knew there was only one person the 13th could be. Catalina, the actress I'd replaced. She must be jealous of me. Bitter. Maybe she wanted to take my role, like I'd taken hers. It would be insane. But it was all that made sense. She was the only other person who had the costume, who knew the keypad code to get into the theater. She must have recovered from her fall and come to find me. It was almost like a game. It definitely made the show more interesting for me. Before I realized what was happening, I dreaded performances. I felt stupid, taking on this role in a show I didn't even understand. But now I had so much to do. I had a plan. I started showing up early, an hour before my call time. I walked my old spots, thinking I may see her. The other chorus girls were impressed that I was showing up early, thinking it showed some sort of dedication to the show. I think they even started to hate me less. They still detested any attempts at conversation in the wings, but in the dressing room, I started to have a few breakthroughs. In particular, I started a semi-friendship with Erin. Ironically, she had been one of the 3 women I thought may be the 13th, until I realized the 13th wasn't really one of us at all. She was the only person who I could actually ask about Catalina. Did she ever say anything about the theater? The building, I mean. Did she have a favorite part of it? Erin would laugh at my seemingly random specificity. We weren't close, Michelle. I have no idea what she thought about the theater. What did she do on her breaks? Erin thought for a second. I don't know. I never saw her at the vending machines or the dressing room. I guess she found some quiet place to run lines. That confirmed it, for me. A quiet place like the catwalk, or the orchestra pit. We were 3 weeks into our 5-week run when I came up with a plan to catch Catalina. It wasn't a great plan, and I had no idea if it would work, but showing up an hour early every day was making me tired, and producing 0 results. I needed a new strategy. I realized that after seeing her in the pit, I only ever saw the 13th when all 12 of us were together. So I told a white lie. One night after the show, when everyone was changing in the dressing room, I appealed to my fellow chorus girls. Are you guys busy before the show tomorrow? I innocently asked. I'm feeling a little shaky on some of the entrances. If we could all get here just 20 minutes before our call time tomorrow, I'd love to run some stuff with you guys. I've been running it on my own, but without the entire team, I don't always remember where I fit. To my surprise and intense joy, everyone agreed. They really did seem to respect me more when I looked like I was taking my role seriously. I could barely sleep that night. I was so excited to see if my plan worked. And hey, if it didn't, I had 2 more weeks of shows to think up something else. It was a Sunday night, our last show of the week. Mondays are often dark days in professional theater, meaning there are no shows that day to give the team a rest. I had planned this on purpose. If I failed, I had a dark day to reflect on that failure and try again. At 5:40, 20 minutes before our call time, all the girls were assembled and in costume. We started running entrances. After 10 minutes, I thought my plan had failed. We had run our first 3 entrances, and I never counted more than 12 heads in the wings. But around 5:55, as we got to our entrances in Act 2, Off-Stage, I locked eyes with a mask. A 13th mask. I quickly told everyone, "I think I got it, you guys. Thank you so much for coming early." Everyone mumbled that it was no problem, that they were happy to help. The 13th mask broke eye contact with me, looking around in confusion, perhaps distress. The girl started to trickle back towards the dressing room. The 13th turned and power walked away. I shoved through the crowd to catch her, not calling out like I had in the past. I knew she didn't respond to that. I knew I had to catch her now or never. Once we were out of the crowd's eye line, I began to run. She ran too. "You're not getting away this time," I yelled, like some kind of cartoon superhero. My adrenaline was pumping, and blood rushed to my ears. After I yelled, I suddenly became aware of another set of running feet behind me. "Michelle? Where are you going?" It was Erin's voice. "Don't follow me," I hastily called back, picking up speed. The 13th also picked up speed. Though she was running just as fast as I was, she showed no signs of exertion. I couldn't hear heavy breathing or heavy feet on the floor. It was like she was gliding. It infuriated me. Erin didn't let up. "Michelle, the stage manager is going to wonder where we are." I ignored her. The 13th rounded a corner, and I realized where she was going. The catwalk. The ladder. She ascended the rungs rapidly like a spider. I clambered up much less gracefully. Erin's voice had a heavy tinge of concern. "Michelle, what are you doing? It's not safe up there." "Then don't follow me," I yelled back, exasperated. "This is between me and her." Despite my vocal warning, I heard Erin climbing behind me. Once on the metal rail, I looked both ways, terrified she'd escape me again. But her white toga was just a few feet away, retreating into darkness. I lunged at her. The entire catwalk shook. The 13th and I both grabbed the railing to steady ourselves. We met eyes. Or rather, we met masks. "You have nowhere to go," I stated. I heard Erin reaching the top of the ladder behind me. "Michelle, come down, please. You're scaring me." "I can't. I finally have her." I took a step towards the 13th. She took an equal and opposite step back. "Take the mask off," I beckoned her. "I know it's you, Catalina." I felt the rail shake slightly as Erin got on it. "What are you talking about, Michelle?" "She's been sneaking in, Erin. She's been standing in the wings with us before we enter. For weeks." I took another step towards the 13th. In my peripheral vision, I could see how high we were above the stage. 30 feet. You could die falling from that height. "It's not Catalina. It can't be." "Stop this," Erin called. Finally, frustrated, I turned towards her. "Who else could it be?" Erin had taken her mask off. Her face was streaked with terror. "Catalina died, Michelle. She fell off this catwalk, directly onto her face, and she died. Please come down with me. I don't know who you're talking to, and I don't know what you're trying to do, but it isn't worth it." "What are you talking about? I'm talking to—" I turned back, and she was gone. Vanished like a bad dream. "I swear to God, Erin," I started to say. "She was right in front of me. I chased her. Here." I turned back to Erin. The 13th was behind her. It made no sense. Nobody can move that fast. Nobody can be in front of me 1 second and behind me the next. It was inhuman. I stopped speaking. I stopped breathing. It sucks to learn that in a fight-or-flight situation, my answer is to freeze. Erin must have seen how my face changed. "Michelle?" she asked quietly. "What's wrong?" Behind her, the 13th raised a hand to her mask. Her hands were impossibly pale. How had I never noticed that before? She gripped the mask in her hand. Time stretched. It must have only been a second, because Erin didn't move. But it felt like years of my life passed me as the 13th, inch by inch, raised her mask from her face. Or raised her mask. Because there was no face. Under the mask, pale and gruesome, was a bloody flat edge. Broken, disgusting. It was impossible to make out eyes, or a nose, or a mouth. Inside a somewhat face-shaped frame of stark white skin, all I could see was flesh, red and raw, squished in on itself. Like someone had fallen from a very high height and landed on their face. By the time I finally began to react, it was too late. The 13th, or Catalina, or the ghost, or whatever the fuck that thing was. It moved its hands from the mask to Erin's shoulders, and it pushed. And she screamed agonizingly loud as she flew over the side of the railing, and she screamed for the second or so she was in the air. I was screaming too, and after the crunch of her body hitting the wooden floor of the stage, everyone else screamed, cast and crew alike. I stared down at her limp form from 30 feet up. Her legs were twisted the wrong way. A pool of blood began to seep out of her. When I looked up again, I expected the 13th to be gone, but it wasn't. With no eyes, it was also looking down at Erin, at what it had done. And then, slowly, it turned towards me. On all fours, backwards, I scrambled away from the catwalk, terrified, not wanting to be next. The 13th's shoulders shook rapidly, like a person laughing. But it made no sound. It never made a sound. Not going up the stairs of the orchestra pit, not when it pushed Erin, and not as it climbed back down the ladder, rung by rung. I found myself alone on the catwalk. Erin survived, somehow, paralyzed from the waist down. Apparently she fell on her legs, which, when you're falling from 30 feet up, is a good thing. If she'd gone down head first, there was no chance. The show had to close, of course. When they lost Catalina a few weeks into rehearsal, she was replaceable. But with me refusing to go on, and Erin in the hospital, there was nothing to be done. I haven't seen Erin since that day. I felt too guilty. But I was never arrested, so I guess she had told the authorities that I didn't push her. I don't know what she told them. I don't know what I would have told them had they asked me. I don't do stage plays anymore. The family I used to nanny for gave me a star-studded recommendation, and now I can make my living taking care of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old for another filthy rich family. I still act, but I only audition for film work. I don't even see plays these days. I won't set foot in a theater. If the 13th had vanished off that catwalk, maybe things would be different. Maybe I could chalk it up to an extreme hallucination. Some terrifying creature in my mind brewed up to cope with the stress of the show and paying rent. Maybe I could even forget its bloody mess of viscera and the vague shape of a face. But I saw it go down that ladder, rung by fucking rung, and I know it's still out there. Erin was unlucky. Erin was a victim of being at the wrong place at the wrong time, and if I step inside a theater again, some way, somehow, I know the 13th will get me on another catwalk. This time, I'll be the one going over the railing, and I've never once landed on my feet.